Hello ladies and gentlemen, I'm Paul TX14 Walsh and welcome to some more Gran Turismo Sport, a racing game developed by Polyphony Digital and published by Sony Interactive Entertainment for the PlayStation 4. Focusing on the game's online mode, known as Sport Mode, in this episode I take a look at my performance in the second race of the second stage of the 2019 Manufacturer Series season, which was a Group 4 race held at the Autopolis International Racing Course. With that, let's get racing. Taking a look at the grid then, you'll see that I've qualified second with a 154.0. My story for qualifying, it was a spot on session in that my target time for the bank lap was the 154.0 and I achieved that, whereas my fast lap was going to be a high 153.6, by the target I set myself, but at the time I realised that was not going to be good enough for pole, so I decided to try and replicate a lap I did achieve on one occasion in practice, a 153.4. But when I went for it on my fast lap, I went too deep into turns 1 and 3, immediately compromising the lap, and in the end I had to settle for my banker lap, which was good enough for second. Can't complain because that factored in nicely into my race strategy. For this 8 lap race, you could do either the no stop or the 1 stop, as tyre wear was going to be extreme here, whereas fuel consumption was not an issue. You could run the race from start to end without any fuel saving. With regards to the tyre wear, I found that the no stop was the more viable strategy for 2 reasons. Firstly, on average it was 5 seconds faster over the entire race distance, and secondly, this was a difficult track to overtake on, particularly in the final third, so from turns 12 through to the final turn at 19, where trying to get past someone there you had to have a major pace advantage and essentially force yourself down the side of their car. Deep lunges would be in effect. So as a result, I went for the strategy which preferred track position, being able to defend against aggressors, rather than trying to fight my way back through the field after making the pit stop. Now, with regards to the tyre choice, I actually went for a combination of the racing hard and the racing mediums. The hards being on the front, the mediums being on the rear, whereas in qualifying I did it entirely on the mediums. This was because the tyre wear on the front tyres for the NSX in the Group 4 category was very severe compared to the rear tyres, but as soon as I switched to the racing hards on the front, that actually balanced out the tyre wear really nicely and made the car very comfortable to drive even on the final couple of laps, which you're going to see. Now, as we come to the end of the grid here, all of us being B driver rating drivers, this 20 car group, we're about to get underway with the typical roll-in start. My objective for the first couple of laps is not to try and make a move on the BMW in front. It's essentially to try and stay behind them as close as possible, because what I want to happen is for us two to break away from the rest of the field. And by doing so, that means we can start to manage our races more easily, and we can actually start to think about fighting against the guy in front, and they can think about fighting us as we go deeper into the race. Whereas if we're worried about the guys behind, then we lose that ability to manage the tyres more effectively, and we lose sight of trying to achieve the win, and instead we're fighting for second place. So everybody tucks in behind one another slipstream, as always, going down into turn 1 here, and I'm going to be caught a little bit by surprise in terms of the braking point of the BMW in front. They broke a little bit earlier than I expected, so I decided to brake a bit heavier, but in return it doesn't cost me too much time, as they get a little bit sideways coming out of turn 1 and we charge down in towards turn 3, up ahead the severe right-hander. And looking in the rearview mirror, you're going to see the BMW and Audi TT behind are going to get very close behind at this point, albeit not too close here, and as a result, it looks as though they're going to start fighting a little bit. I am going to go to the inside going into turn 6 to defend against a potential lunge from the BMW, but that's my typical racing line on this circuit anyway, so there's no problems there. And if we get a nice run out of this corner and tuck in behind the BMW in front by using their slipstream, we should start to pull away, seeing that the BMW back in third made a little error coming out of turn 6, and tucking in the slipstream now we can see that that gap is starting to pull out a little bit, as the guys behind are starting to jostle for third place all the way down to, by looks of things, about 7th or 8th. As we come up into the hairpin here at turn 11, we can see that that gap between the rest of the field is starting to show. As we come out of turn 11, the BMW behind gets a little bit awry coming out of the corner, and as a result of that, now the gap's expanded out to 1.3 seconds, and myself and the BMW in front of me are making that breakaway as I mentioned at the very start. And this is perfect now, because what I have to focus on is purely the guy in front, running their slipstream, not letting it affect my car too much and my racing lines, compared to my experience at the Red Bull Ring in the Group 3 category last time out, where that really was an issue. And we seem to be managing okay. We're having to do a little bit of lifting early going into the braking zones to avoid running into the back of the guy in front or braking too deep, and as a result increasing the wear on the front tyres in particular. But this seems manageable, and this is a great position, and if we can hold on to this position for at least another lap, then we can really start to settle into the race. And as we come across the line here, I can see that the gap between myself and the BMW in front is starting to open up a little bit. It's heading out towards 0.7 seconds. We'll be heading out to 0.8 seconds perhaps in a little while, albeit the slipstream here is starting to bring us a bit closer to that rather fast BMW M4. Albeit, if this gap does start to expand, that's not too much of an issue at the moment, because remember, we're planning to fight at the end of the race, not towards the start or the midpoint. I'd rather see how much tyre wear we both share and expend before we get into that fighting position, as I felt very comfortable in driving the NSX here with a large amount of tyre wear. So on laps 7 and 8, I would be very feisty compared to other drivers potentially who would have really started to feel uncomfortable with respect to their tyres. Coming into turn 6 for the second time then, we can see the difference in racing lines. Preferring that tighter line means that we get very tight to the apex, and then we just gradually let the roll of the car, the momentum of the car, shift it out to the outside, getting on the power through turn 7 and then into 8 and 9 here, the left-hander, the double barrel, and then switching back to the right-hander for turn 10 up to the hairpin at turn 11. But what you'll notice that the gap between myself and the BMW in front is actually starting to expand a little bit. Now at the time, what I was thinking was perhaps the BMW in front is running medium tyres on all four wheels I should say, and that would indicate that they will have a natural pace advantage at least at the start of the race, because the medium tyre was the grippier tyre, so therefore you can thrash it around a little bit more. But in return, what I was expecting perhaps would be that the BMW would start to fall off the race pace faster than myself as we go deeper in, so around lap 4, lap 5 we'd start to see an equalisation in the lap time, and then going into lap 6 onwards I would start to have the advantage because I'd have the more durable tyres. Alternatively, it could be that the BMW has decided, right, been able to pull away from the group, I've just got the one Honda behind me who's holding on to my rear, let me push a little bit more and start moving towards a preferred strategy, perhaps the one stop, or perhaps they just want to be a little bit aggressive here and make sure I'm not getting the benefit of the distant toe off the back of their car. There's a number of variables that were going through my mind, thinking about what they could potentially be planning, and I thought really it was a case of, right, they're on the racing mediums and they're probably pushing a little bit harder right now, so that way they get a bit of a gap and I can't use the slipstream to pull me along on the straights and therefore make up the time I'm losing. As we switch to the replay camera here, just to give you a third person perspective of the racing lines I'm taking when the tyres are in a nice state, and we'll be doing so again on the final lap to show you the difference in racing line and how having to more carefully manage the car once the tyre wear really becomes a significant factor. Now I must be honest, I love this circuit. It's an absolutely fantastic circuit to drive around. The only issue I have with the circuit is the lack of overtaking opportunities. And I find that as long as you are very close behind someone and going through the first half of the circuit in particular, so turns 1 through to turn 10, then you can really fight and there's a great number of opportunities. But it's in that final sector where it's a case if you're behind a slower driver, you get held up massively unless you go for a very risky move, which can lead to you forcing someone off the track, alternatively you having an accident with the other driver. And so that's why I wanted to really go for the no-stop strategies, because I felt as though having track position was key, and I've found that so far over the course of this season, track position has been a key asset on a lot of races. There seems to have been a preference for sprint races, alternatively races that when there's multiple strategies, there's the favour of the no-stop rather than the one-stop. And once this race ended, just going to give a little bit of a heads up, I was hoping that perhaps future races would see that the one-stop strategy would be the stronger one and the no-stop drivers would really have to fight to hold on to the positions they gained through the no-stop strategy, that defensive driving coming in right at the end of the race. But only time will tell in that regard. Focusing back on what's happening here, not too much at the moment, gotta admit, a lovely set in the track, the graphics absolutely phenomenal. That's something that I'm always marvelling at with regards to the replay camera in particular for GT Sport, can't complain at that. We can see behind we do have an Audi TT who's getting a little bit closer at this point in time. Now I wasn't concerned about that at all, because the Audi TT is a front engine front wheel drive car, and I knew from doing a little bit of research about that car as modelled in game that the tyre wear through the front tyres of that car would be absolutely severe about the midpoint of this race unless they decide to go into the pit, and therefore going for a no-stop strategy in the TT was going to be a risky one because you'd really fall off the pace by the midpoint. So as a result, I would see them in third place at the moment as a rolling roadblock to the rest of the field, and I can just focus on managing my race and managing the hunt for first place. But as we can see, having gotten to lap number 4 now, the gap between myself and the BMW in front has expanded all the way to 2.5 seconds, which is a huge jump since the previous lap. Now, what I'm thinking at this point is perhaps the BMW in front has decided, you know what, I'm going to go for a one-stop strategy, which they could potentially, because we've got such a gap between us and the rest of the field right now, that they could go into the pits and come out roughly in, say, 4th or 5th position, just as a rough order of magnitude estimate, and then they'd have to fight past a couple of cars. But remember, most of the cars are most likely going to be on no-stop strategies like myself, so they're not going to have to worry about doing too much fighting, and by the looks of things, they have a very strong amount of pace in that car, and in terms of their racing line as well as a driver, and they'll be able to get past those cars and potentially get the lead back off of myself right at the end of the race. So I wasn't getting too disheartened at this point in thinking, you know what, that guy's pulling away quite a bit, they're already up to 3 seconds, just let them pull away, because at the end of the day, if we do end up coming second, it's still a fantastic points haul, and it'd be the highest points haul I've achieved so far this season. But of course, there could be the potential for a first place depending on what strategy they're going for. I'm expecting they're going to pit either this lap or the next lap if they are going for the one-stop strategy. As we're coming around here, getting nice and tight in turn 13 as always, and coming through 14, the left-hander, followed by the extended right-hander here, turn 15, which then slaloms out into turn 16, which is the left-hander up the top of the hill here. Absolutely wonderful section, this final section, because it really favours those cars which are able to throw the car around and also make the most of the grip available in the tyres. The NSX being a very fun car to drive around here because we haven't got an immediate chicane, we've effectively got extended chicanes and extended corners, so we don't have to worry about the rear getting out of sorts. Whether it's in the Group 4 or the Group 3 NSXs, it seems to be a weakness in terms of very quick shifting chicanes. And as we come across the line here, we can see that the gap now to first place has expanded to 4.1 seconds. And I was thinking, right, they've got to be pitting soon. Alternatively, the only other thing I can think of is they're absolutely driving a miracle race on those tyres. I was expecting they'd potentially be pitting. Now coming around at this point and going down turn 2, this very gentle right-hander, and heading up towards turn 3, we can see that the gap between myself and the guy in third, the Audi TT, has expanded to 3 seconds, so I've definitely got second place, unless I make a major error, or suddenly somebody comes charging through the field in a late charge to try and get into the podium positions, and perhaps all the way up into first if they somehow magically do that. But I'm really very confident at this point, just keep driving the race. And as you can see in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen, in terms of tyre wear now, tyre wear is very nicely balanced across all 4 tyres, and this is something that I'd recommend to those of you who are perhaps newer to the online world of GT Sport and are taking part in races where tyre wear and fuel management is muddled. You want to aim typically for a balance of tyre wear across all 4 tyres, because what that means is, yes, the overall pace of your car will drop off naturally because tyre wear means that you don't have as much grip and therefore you can't be as aggressive with the car, you might have to change your racing lines. But in return, if you've got that balance across all 4 tyres, it means that when you go into each and every corner, you don't have to adjust for each corner. You just adjust your aggression or your overall style with the car as a whole, not a case of if there was more tyre wear on the left hand side of the car, that means whenever I'm going for a right hander I've got to be more careful because I know I haven't got as much grip available in the left hand tyres as I would in in left handed corners where the tyre wear on the right hand set of tyres would be much more manageable. But we can see the fronts have got a tiny bit more wear than the rears, but it's not too much to offset the balance of the car, and this is perfect, and this is why I went for that combination of racing hard tyres on the front, racing mediums on the rear, because it felt just right. And it means that looking over on the right hand side of your screen now in terms of lap times, ignoring lap number 1, we'll see that laps 2 and 3 were 155s, we're now moving into the 156s, now into the 157.5 with lap number 5. I'm dead on my race pace at this point, my expected race pace for my practice sessions, and I'm expecting the next lap is going to be a very low 158. Now you can see some individuals are starting to go into the pits. Most of the individuals further down the field, they're going to have to fight back for those positions, but the BMW in front has not pitted and we're on lap number 6 now, so I was thinking straight away, Jesus Christ, that guy is fast and is managing those tyres extremely well. And I didn't think they'd be on a set of racing hards because I've raced the BMW M4 on racing hard tyres, and whilst I was a less experienced driver at that point, it didn't feel the most comfortable car to drive, so I thought they've got to be on a set of racing mediums and they've got to be managing those tyres incredibly well. Was it demotivating to see somebody outperforming me by this huge margin? Not really. Was it a reality check? Not really. What it said to me was, there are better drivers out there. I expected to start bumping into better drivers. I'm finally seeing a driver who is phenomenal at tyre management right now, at least I'm gathering at this point. And so, there's plenty more to learn as a result of that. And straight after this race, I'll be taking a look at their replay footage to see what they did differently from me. And we'll talk about that at the end. I'm not going to spoil what happens, things could happen yet. But as we come down the straight here towards turn 12, you can see the gap between myself and the Spaniard in third has expanded out to 5 seconds, well 5.3 seconds, the Spaniard driving a Ferrari 458 if I remember correctly. and they're not going to be gaining too much. Everybody's starting to end up in that position of being locked into a place. So the fights are all locked in because the tyre wear prevents people from pushing too hard now. And it's a case of just managing the car. And if you're in that close-knit fight with another driver, normally you're waiting for someone to make a mistake, an unforced error. And that way you'll gain positions because the tyre wear factor puts extra pressure on the driver to think, I can't drive as aggressively, or if I am going to drive aggressively, I'm taking an increased risk. But as we come out of the final corners here, turns 18, 19 and now onto the start-finish straight, nailing it very nicely so far. You can see that our lap time is another 157. I actually thought it would be a low 158, but it seems as though we're doing better than I expected race pace in the practice sessions. We are driving a very nice race so far. And seeing that lap time on the right hand side, what's nice about that is that gives me a reference point to think, right, am I doing well, am I doing better than expected, or am I doing worse than expected, and I need to try and improve and settle. And so far, to be able to get these consistent lap times based on my expected race pace, I feel very comfortable with this, and it's so just bring this car home, 2 laps to go. And we can see tyre wear wires now. In the bottom left hand corner again, it's a nice balance. We've got pretty much a perfect balance now across all the tyres, albeit the back right, the rear right doesn't have as much wear as the other ones, but it's not too much of a factor here. It's not really coming to effect because a lot of our tyre wear is going through the front tyres, what with the extreme braking zones, and whilst this is a rear wheel drive car mid-engine, it's not having too much of an unsettling effect on the car's balance, so I can be happy there. Now come up into turn 11 for the 7th time, we can see that gap between us and the BMW is continuing to expand, so they are working magic with their tyres. Congratulations to them. And I expect, right, they've won this. There is no way. And we can see that the gap between myself and the Spaniard in 3rd place, the Ferrari, has dropped a little bit. Perhaps they're pushing a little bit harder now. Perhaps they've got a little bit more life in their tyres compared to myself. But I'm not too worried about them making up a gap of 4.5 seconds at least over the next 2 laps, because for them to do so, they've got to be driving a race much like the German in 1st place right now. They've got to have a lot of tyre life left, which I expected would not be the case because they're not closing up the gap fast enough, as we're coming towards the end of lap 7 and we'll be moving on to lap number 8 very shortly. Just coming out the final couple of corners then, going into turn 18 at this point, getting gradually on the throttle, making sure not to drift too wide of the curb, the inner curb, and then coming out onto 19 here to begin the final lap. And we're going to transition over to the replay camera one more time, and now you're going to see again from a 3rd person perspective the difference in the racing line and the feel of the car based on the fact now I've got an extreme amount of tyre wear going through all 4 tyres, and you'll note that this lap is going to be considerably slower than the other one we showed in the replay camera back on lap number 3. Getting nicely through turn 1 then, not getting too tight on the corner because I found that if you hit the inner curb too hard you'd actually bounce off of the curb and end up going into the outer gravel. Coming through turns 2 and now up into the braking point for turn 3, braking a little bit earlier than the little grey strip on the left hand side than normal because of the tyre wear factor. Nailing that nicely, and now coming through turns 4 and 5, the double barrel left hander here. Getting a little bit wide at the apex of 5, but that's not too much of an issue because that throws me over to the inside for turn 6, my preferred racing line. Now coming out to 6, syncing up nicely, not using all the width of the track there. Just imagine the throttle accordingly, and now coming through into turns 8 and 9, the double barrel left hander again. You can see they're a little bit wide at the apex here, could have been a bit tighter, but that's the tyre wear throwing us out to the right hand side. And now as we come through up towards the hairpin, so going through turn 10 right now, and now getting ready for the braking zone, braking earlier than normal because of the tyre wear. We can see in our rearview mirror the Ferrari gradually gaining us, but they're roughly 4 seconds away right now, and that gap is balanced out very nicely. Not going to have to worry about them putting any late pressure on us. Just drive the race, drive a natural race at this point, and we'll definitely be coming home in 2nd as we come into the final third of the circuit, so turn 12. Getting that nice coming out onto the outer curb, line us up perfectly to go into turn 13. Could have perhaps been a little bit tighter, but then again the momentum is carrying us through up into 14 and then through into the right hander here, turn 15. And this wonderful section of going up the hill, up in towards the return left hander at turn 16. Getting right over the curb there, and now just letting the car roll through into turn 17, letting the momentum carry us through, and now round into turns 18 and 19 to complete the final lap of the race. The BMW's already crossed the line, congratulations to them, they've driven an absolute perfect race, their tyre management was superb by the looks of things, but as for us, we're going to come across the line in a very happy 2nd place. Having had time to reflect, I was very happy with this result in that in a race that was really hard on tyre wear, I was able to achieve a rather nice pace, and I actually beat my practice race time, my best possible practice race time, by 2.5 seconds, which showed that I was really getting comfortable with the tyre wear on the NSX going over the race distance. But the key thing here is the fact that I've got a lot to learn with respect to tyre management, and having watched the footage, the onboard footage of the BMW who finished first, what I found was the reason they were braking earlier than myself going into the harder corners, so turns 1 and 3 and turn 11, was because they were only applying 50 to 75% of the potential braking force, whereas I was applying a full 100%. And over the race distance, less braking force applied per corner actually means that you've got more tyre life available, and they did indeed do the entire race on a set of racing mediums on both the front and rear wheels, whereas I had to go for the combination of the hards on the front and the mediums on the rear. So a lot to consider, and once this season has concluded, because of the very back-to-back nature of all the races at the moment, I'll definitely be working on improving my tyre wear management and looking at how I can change my braking force application in order to improve that in particular. But still, this race did not wear me out as perhaps it could have with the tyre wear, and that means we can move on now to the third race of Stage 2 at the Autodrome Lago Maggiore GP No. 2 circuit on Saturday the 10th of August 2019. Thank you for watching. If you did enjoy this video, be sure to leave a like, comment or subscribe for future episodes. As always, I have been TX141, and until next time, take care and drive safely.